Yes, out means outside of that.
Okay, but if you put it in front of a verb like outrun, out argue, out think, out outsmart, what does that mean when you put the word out in front of a verb?
Means excluding that outside of.
Uh,
mm,
when you put the word out in front of a verb, it means that there's a competition and you won. So if I
okay.
if I argue with you uh,
Yeah.
and I win the argument, I say I out argued Pachu.
Okay.
Wait, let's see. Uh, let's take a look at this. Okay, I'm going to put a picture up on the screen. Let me know when you can see the screen. Takes a little bit of a maybe 30 seconds. Tell me if you can see the picture on the screen.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
So do you see that there's a competition? What kind of competition are they having?
Yeah, it's a marathon
Okay,
running competition.
they're running, right? Do
Mm.
you agree they're running?
Yes, running.
Okay, which person is winning?
The person with the
Okay.
uh,
Okay.
red shirt.
So we can say the man in the red is outrunning everyone.
Okay. Okay.
Can you say that?
The man with the red one is out of
And not out of, just out. Out plus verb. Outrunning
is outrunning.
is outrunning the other people. You have to put an object here. We need to mention both sides. The man in the red outruns the other people, let's say. That's
The
good.
man
Uh,
the man with the red is outruns the other person.
okay, right. So that means the competition is running and the man in the red is winning. He's outrunning the other people.
Oh, oh yes, yes.
What does it mean if you put out in front of a verb? Can you tell me?
Yeah, the person is mm, in competition and he's winning.
Okay, that's right. So the person in the front part of the verb is winning and the people on the other side of the verb are losing. Is that pretty clear?
Yes, yes.
Let's so that was the first word that you had written. You said what is out argue? So let's practice using out argue in a sentence. Let me just put something up here. Uh,
Yes, yes.
so
Okay.
what I'm going to do is I'm going to try something. We haven't done this before, but I'm just going to try something a little bit different today.
Yeah,
So I'm
yes.
putting I'm putting an image on the screen. Okay, it would take a moment before you can see it.
Okay, sir.
Let me know when you can see the image on the screen, the new image.
Yes, yes, yes,
What does that mean? Can you
yes.
first of all can you explain to me the meaning of the sentence? He couldn't out argue his boss.
Means uh, he he couldn't out argue his boss.
Hmm.
Means uh, he is the person who is argue
Hmm.
with his boss, um, but he is in the winning side, and the boss is in losing side.
Okay, but we have he couldn't, so that means actually he lost. He couldn't win the
Yeah, yes.
he couldn't win the argument with his boss.
Yeah, means the person is losing, yeah.
That's right. He's losing because we said he couldn't. Okay. Can you read the first part of
Mm,
the phrase? What does the first part of the phrase mean? Read
okay,
it.
sir.
Just read it.
E-
Just pronounce it. Go ahead.
Even though he was right,
Okay. So let's take a look at that first word, even. Even. What do you think about the vowel sounds?
even means long.
Well, there are two vowel sounds. Are they both long?
E, even though,
Mm-hmm.
even though,
Forget about though. Just think about even. Even. There are two vowel sounds. Are they are they both long? Are they both short? Tell me what you think of the two vowel sounds in even. Mm.
even means is is long.
Uh-huh.
Ben is also long. I think
Even,
even.
even, even, even.
Okay, okay. Last is short.
That's right. Short. It's short. Short.
Short,
Okay, what about the
short.
word though? Though. Is that a
Mm.
big sound or a little sound? Though.
Though is big sound.
Okay,
Big.
that's right. So the way this sounds, it's long, short, long. Even though.
Even though,
That's right.
even though,
Even though. Even though.
even even though.
Now the word he we'll just attach that to the word though, and we'll say even though we, even though we'll just make it one long big vowel sound. Even though we,
Even though we,
e-
even though we,
mhm. Even though he was,
even though he was,
even though he was right.
even though he was right.
Okay. What do you think about the word right? Is that a big sound or a little sound? Right.
A big sound is a right. The right.
Okay, so we have even though he was right.
Uh, even though he was right. He
Okay.
was right.
Now let's take a look at the second part. He
Yeah.
couldn't. He couldn't. Couldn't. What do you think about the vowel sounds in the word couldn't? Are those big sounds or little sounds? Couldn't.
Is small.
They're
Is
small.
couldn't. Is
Okay.
couldn't.
What about
Mm.
he? Is he sometimes he can be big and sometimes it can be small? What do you think about in this case? Do you think this is a big sound or a little sound?
Uh, Small.
Well, even though he was right, he couldn't. Could be. Okay, let's do that. We'll make it small. Sometimes we have a choice. Okay,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
but if you make he small, then probably you should make couldn't big. He couldn't.
Yes. Yes. He couldn't. But
Mhm.
he's make he's longer.
Okay,
Yeah.
then the way that you would say it is even though he was right, he couldn't.
Yeah. Even though he was right, he couldn't. He couldn't.
He couldn't. He couldn't.
He couldn't. Couldn't.
Okay.
He couldn't.
And so our next word is the new verb that we've learned, which is out argue. What does that mean if you put the word out in front of a verb?
Uh, Means uh, is competition is
Uh,
happening competition,
That's right.
but is winning side. The
Okay.
thing is on winning side.
So what do you think is more important, the out or the argue? Which word do you think is more important, out or argue?
Out.
I think you're right. But also, remember we said when you have two words together, usually you put the emphasis
Yeah.
on the first word, not the second word. Not always, but usually.
Yes.
He couldn't out argue.
He he couldn't out argue.
Okay. And what do you think
Yeah.
about the word his? Is that an important word or no?
No.
It's not. So
Not
let's make it part of the word argue and say he couldn't out argue his.
okay. He couldn't out argue
Argue is.
his.
Argue is. Argue is. Just make his part of argue. Out argue
Okay.
is.
Out argue his.
Hmm.
Out argue his
And how about the word boss? Is that a big sound or a little sound? Boss. The
is a big sound. Yeah,
okay.
it's a big sound.
He couldn't out argue his boss.
He couldn't out argue his boss.
Even though he was right, he couldn't out argue his boss.
Even though he was right, couldn't out argue his boss.
Okay. I just didn't hear the word he. Can you say that again? I need to hear you say he couldn't out argue his boss.
He couldn't out argue his boss. He couldn't
He couldn't.
out argue his.
Hmm.
He
Okay.
couldn't. He could.
Uh Pachu, do you see this? I put a new sentence on the video. Do you
Okay,
see the
sir.
new sentence
Yes.
on the
Yes.
screen? How will you make a question? Can you ask a yes no question with he could out argue his boss? How will you ask a yes no?
Yes. Yeah. Could he out argue his boss?
Okay. Uh could he? Could he? Could he?
Mm. Could he
Could he out argue
could
his
he
could he out argue his boss?
could he out argue his boss?
How would you answer no?
Uh, no, he couldn't out argue his boss.
Okay, and sometimes the word he will just attach to the word in front of it. No he. No he couldn't.
Okay.
No he couldn't.
No, he couldn't. No, he couldn't.
No he couldn't out argue his boss.
No, he couldn't out argue his boss.
Okay.
Couldn't.
So let's move on to another vocabulary word.